you on that last point that Celia McGinnis just made. Let's refresh our viewers' recollection. Has Michael Jackson been charged with any of these prior alleged acts that Mr. Sneddon plans to introduce? Or convicted, for that matter?
No. And I'll give you the short answer, no.
And you know I'm making a point there for the defense, aren't I? Well, Jack, it's rather controversial, and it's limited to just a few states, California being one of them, to allow this kind of thing in. But as Celia suggests, perhaps the policy reason behind it to protect victims who might not come forward and to be sure that perpetrators who might be recidivist in nature would be prosecuted anyway. Perhaps it's not beyond what the legislature intended. Perhaps we're underlining that presumption of innocence.
My guess is that the answer to that depends upon the acts. But I'll put on my old prosecutor's hat and say that we can bring legislation into this at some point. I suspect you ask just about any prosecutor in California, they'll say we can still protect the rights of a criminal defendant, such as Michael Jackson in this case. We have a judge who's going to tell jurors exactly what they can use this for, what they can't use it for. We have a balancing act that has to be done before this ever happens here. We're watching now Michael Jackson arriving live at the courthouse here, as he has. It's something of a tradition since the beginning of this case got started. The car pulls up. He has some folks with him, usually some family members, his dad. But again, going back to what we were talking about, prosecutors are going to say to you, there's a balancing test that a judge does here, deciding whether this is way too prejudicial. People say, well, prejudicial, it's always prejudicial. Otherwise, the prosecutor wouldn't want to introduce this. That's the whole idea. But if it's far too prejudicial, then a judge can say, I'm not going to let it come in. But you're right, it is a departure. And whenever you have a departure from what tradition has been, people are always going to look at it and say, is this really a good thing for the justice system? And apparently the California courts, all the way up to the California Supreme Court, has said, yeah, this is fine. We're going to allow this to exist.
And Jack, it seems that even the fans recognize that this is a significant day for Michael Jackson, and even for the prosecutors, there are more fans there today. And this is that escalated into Michael Jackson's hand on his genitalia. Well, how long did it last? He said, well, more than the first instance, more than 3 minutes, but fewer than 20 minutes. I really can't remember. He said, I was only about 7 years old. Where was he touching you? He was touching me on top of my shorts. My orange shorts that my mother made me because we were very poor, and I always wore them.
Right, I said yes, and when he got in the car, before I even realized what
Let me just interrupt you for a moment, because this is a live shot of Michael Jackson leaving court today. That's his mother, of course, next to him, the bodyguard holding the umbrella over him, looking somewhat happy and cheerful, talking in an animated way as he leaves. Jake, go ahead. We know that ultimately that you did molest your little 5-year-old, and you went to prison for 5 years. You've been out for 14 years, and you haven't reoffended. And the part of your story that's so interesting to me is how you have managed to stay clean, so to speak. It's almost like an addiction. How have you managed to stop yourself?
I think the most important thing that stops me is the work that I've done with former